face behind the mess so they can hold me accountable.
Okay, let's see.
That's the trick is setting things down, forgetting where I said it.
Well, I'm trying to get this to work, but it's not wanting to work.
Part of it's because our internet puck has not been reset
Well,
for the new. Yeah, I've never seen this area ever have to put one of those public announcements out, you know, when your phone goes,
yeah.
to tell people to stay out of off the roads if you're not evacuated.
I saw that yesterday. and I
That's
thought, oh,
ridiculous.
man, that sounds like a mess.
Oh, dude. I was like, wow.
Okay.
Shouldn't be on.
No, you really shouldn't. But I mean, a panicked person. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Okay, so we'll pick it off with a prayer real quick, and then we'll dive into the 10 plagues. Our Father in heaven, we come before you in prayer this morning. Very thankful for the opportunity to gather together to study your word. We're thankful for the gift of this place, and we pray that you be with those who have lost their homes and those who are fleeing their homes. Please be with the responders and with those who are under duress. We pray that cooler heads will prevail. We ask that you be with those who are not with us. Please keep them safe. We look forward to seeing them again. We pray that you will join us and open our hearts and minds as we study your word. For it is in your son's name we pray. Amen. Okie dokie. So a month ago, we did Moses. And a big part of Moses' story is, of course, the 10 plagues. The 10 plagues, there are probably 100 different ways to slice and dice them. It's a very complex and rich story. The surface of it is very direct, right? There's essentially 10 catastrophes that escalate in intensity, culminating with the 10th plague, which is the death of the firstborn of all of Egypt. But it starts relatively small compared to death. It starts with just a plague of blood. But it's much more, when the text is analyzed, we can look at it from a theological angle, a psychological angle, and then by extension, the societal impact that the plagues have, and how the plagues became the plagues and why they're significant in the way that they are, because they're very relevant today, and the consequences, the behavior that led to the plagues and the ensuing consequences are something that we can still learn from today. So that's what our analysis is going to be. So to begin, this story, the story of the plagues, is, to my knowledge, from what I have been able to research and find, is only recorded in the book of Exodus. It's not recorded in Egyptian texts. That is not surprising because it's a pretty humiliating defeat of the Egyptians and their king and their entire way of life. Not really something that you would want to write down. So there's not a lot of corroborating evidence that this story blow for blow the same way that it's outlined in Exodus. However, the way that it's outlined in Exodus, and the manner in which it's presented, and the fact that there is still a tradition that even persists today that harkens back to the plagues. That would be Passover. Passover is the Jewish festival that is a result of the plagues. It's continued today. The story has been unchanged for generations. That means something, especially with oral history, that means something. So, basically, to set the scene, Pharaoh, and the story of the plagues begins in Exodus chapter 7. So Pharaoh, as a political figure, is charged with maintaining order for the nation. Okay, so under Egyptian theology, Pharaoh was essentially like the embodiment of a god on earth, and he was charged with stewarding the nation. That tradition is very, 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 very old. And this idea of a god shepherding a nation is something that has persisted in Egyptian theology for a long time. So anyway, Pharaoh's charged with maintaining order. That's his job. And what we'll find is that these plagues are progressively chaotic and get more so based upon how Pharaoh commits to that order. And basically, each plague is a direct challenge to an Egyptian god. It's a direct challenge to Pharaoh and is an illustration of God's capacity to both create and decreate, or reverse creation. So we're going to see throughout the plagues mirrors of creation and the creation story, but inverse and turned on their head. And the very last slide, which is in your handout, is a layout of that. I made a chart that compares what's happening in creation in Genesis, it's all positive, and then what's happening in Exodus, which are negative, or inverses of each other. Okay, so we'll read about the first plague, and then we'll break ecological implication, and then what happens to society writ large when people behave this way. So Exodus chapter 7, the scene is that Moses and Aaron had been essentially talking to Pharaoh, or who's God that I should. So the tyrant's coming out swinging, basically. So in Exodus chapter 9, we're going to be in verse 19. And the Lord spake unto Moses, say unto Aaron, take thy rod and stretch out thine hand upon the waters of Egypt. That would be definitely a direct reference to the Nile, which is key to Egyptian life. Upon their streams, upon their rivers, and upon their ponds, and upon all their pools of water, that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded. And he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river, in the sight of Pharaoh, and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went into his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, for they could not drink of the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river. So Pharaoh had this court of magicians that earlier on had demonstrated their ability to command natural elements. When Moses and Aaron first approached Pharaoh, they turned their rods into snakes. And Moses turns his rod into a snake that then consumes all of the other snakes and then turns back into a rod. And so the idea being that God is conquering or demonstrating his authority and sovereignty over their own pantheon. And so one of the things Pharaoh does is the first few plagues, he looks to his magicians and is like, hey, can you do this too? Type of thing. And so they also turn water into blood. But the extent to which the water in Egypt was turned to blood is so extensive that even when they were digging wells around the river, they were coming up with blood, which is crazy. But there's a lot that we can learn from this story. Okay, so first of all, God is challenging the authority of the Nile. So the Nile was key to life in Egypt and was ruled by a deity called Hapi, or Hapi, I don't know. Hapi is how it's rendered in English. So this goddess ruled over the Nile, and God is asserting his sovereignty not only over that deity, which would make it not a deity, but his own sovereignty over water, which is a mirror to what happened way back in the beginning in creation in Genesis, right? The first movement of God is over water. That's Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. We see God asserting his control over water and inverting that in creation, water was the cauldron of life. Well, now it has become death. It has become blood. So Pharaoh himself is being challenged in this miracle, or in all of these miracles, because he is able to reassert his authority over the Nile. Good morning. Plague number 1, the plague of blood. So Pharaoh's order, his divine remit to maintain order over Egypt and to steer the nation is now being eroded, and it begins at the heart of the nation, the Nile itself. Some imagery there, of course, with blood. God could have chosen any number of substances that he could have turned the water into, but he turned it into blood. And this beginning of chaos is showing how Pharaoh's own tyranny is essentially poisoning the life of Egypt itself, right? He's about to bleed the nation. And that's the imagery that we have of the blood, of all the water being turned into blood, is the blood of the nation literally flowing out. Pharaoh has wounded the nation with his tyranny, like severely, because any king, any person, and the real trick to this story to like feel the plagues is to put yourself in Pharaoh's position, right? You have been raised to believe that you're God on earth. You're waited upon. You control the destiny of Egypt itself. You have wealth coming out of your ears and an entire slave class at your command. And some dude, some 80-year-old man is like, hey, you need to let all these people go so they can serve the Lord. And it's like, I am the Lord. What are you talking about? You know, that tyranny, the pursuit of self, is going to destroy Egypt. And it begins by wounding the nation with that simple phrase, who is God that I should know him? Well, I'm about to show you. So the idea is that this is false. Like, it's a false path. Enticing, but is ultimately a falsehood, and it will corrupt your reality. That's true today, just as it was then. You know, Jason and I were chatting a little bit about all of the death and sin in the world today, and especially in the United States, is indicative of a sick society. How do we get there? We pursue ourselves. And when pleasure and desire are your ultimate aim, you're going to have a problem. And so it begins to escalate because Pharaoh, the description is that Pharaoh hardened his heart. And like we were chatting before class, each one of these plagues is an invitation for Pharaoh to make a choice. And at every invitation, he chooses himself. He doubles down in his tyranny. And so with every plague, God ratchets the pain up a little bit. And so we see with the plague of frogs, that is Exodus chapter 8, beginning verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, go into, thus saith the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, Behold, I will smite all thy border with frogs, and the river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house, and into thy bedchamber, and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thine ovens, and into thy kneading troughs. And the frogs shall come up both on thee, and upon thy people, and upon all thy servants. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying to Aaron, Stretch forth thy hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up upon the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up, and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called to Moses and Aaron and said, Entreat the Lord, that he may take away the frogs from me, and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, Glory over me, what shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants and for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee and thine houses, only that they may remain in the river only? And he said, Tomorrow. And he said, Be it according to thy word, thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. And that the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people, and shall remain in the river only. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the village, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon the heaps, and the land stank. I can only imagine. And when Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart, and hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. So here we see that Pharaoh he'll lie for personal gain. Well, when are you going to let my people go? Tomorrow. Take the frogs away from today, and we'll do it tomorrow. So he's a sociopath, right? We're going to establish that throughout these plagues. But let's first talk about the frogs. Why are the frogs significant? Well, there is an Egyptian goddess called Heket, which was the goddess of fertility and childbirth. Can you guess what symbol she was represented by?
Frog.
Frog. That's right. She's represented by a frog. So we see that God is, again, challenging an Egyptian god directly and asserting his authority over not just the goddess, which would de facto, but over the production of life itself. So we see this inversion of water as the creation of life, or as the cradle of life, or cauldron of life in Genesis, to now it's become this production of overwhelm and of death. These frogs multiply. I can't imagine having so many frogs that get into my oven. Like, that's
I'm just
just,
trying to picture all that. It's,
oh,
that
Yeah.
would be a lot of frogs.
oh, oh, man.
And I like frogs, but yeah.
The noise, the smell,
Yeah.
the slime. I mean, how do you clean up after that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, where you make bread is covered in frogs. How do you wash that? Oh, in the river of blood. Great, got it.
Right.
And so we see that not only is God asserting his sovereignty over life itself, the production of life, right? So the unrestrained production of life is chaos. I mean, that's crazy to have frogs everywhere, and then for them to die, and you have to gather them up and pile them up. I mean, it just sounds like a plague, right? And so the deeper psychological undercurrent of this is the demonstration that when life itself is corrupted, that corruption, that chaos begins to spread into all areas of your life. And those problems will multiply and multiply. And Jesus reminds us that during the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus kind of alludes to that in Matthew chapter 6, which I'll read. Okay. So, remember, Pharaoh's hardening his heart. He has doubled down. Now his problems are spilling into all aspects of life. I think you got him. Nice shot.
I got both.
The proper ideal. If you're only considering yourself and you're not considering the best nature for others, you're not laying up treasures in heaven. You're focused on treasures on earth. So this is what Christ is speaking to in the Sermon on the Mount. This is Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Lay up not for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If you're Pharaoh, and your treasure is me, and you'll notice when Pharaoh asks for relief, he goes, take these frogs away from me and my people. But he says me first, right? And he says that repeatedly. This is a me problem, and I need you to solve it, Moses. Just like do it now, and I'll do my thing tomorrow, right? If we all behave like that, and we all behave like little pharaohs, we will discover that the balance in society will start to crumble because there becomes no boundaries, right? Your problems begin to spill over and your selfishness begins to spill over into all aspects of your life. That is the deeper meaning to these frogs, right? And I remember reading this as a kid, and it's a very fantastical series of events. But as an adult, I read through it now, and I'm like, I feel like God is trying to teach me things with these plagues. And it's that as a tyrant, you squeeze control, the more the thing that you're squeezing oozes out of your hands into out of control, right? So the more you squeeze, the worse it's going to get. That's just the nature of it. Okay. So, if frogs weren't bad enough, we're now going to talk about lice. Okay. So, Exodus chapter 8, verse 16. And the Lord said unto Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod, and smite the dust of the land, that it might become lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did so. For Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and smote the dust of the earth, and it became lice in man and in beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. For there were lice upon man and upon beasts. Then the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. Okie dokie. So, I have never personally had lice. My niece has, and it does not seem very pleasant at all.
It's not fun.
Yeah, it does not seem very pleasant at all. I can seeing the ground move with lice.
Dude.
That would be gross.
That would be horrifying. Okay, so breaking it down. The god of the earth for the Egyptians was a god named Geb. So we're seeing God, capital G, assert his sovereignty over dust, right? Over the earth itself. We see to a god in the Egyptian pantheon, which would, again, make them not a god. And that's what the magicians demonstrate. So here's the thing. If you're covered in lice, you're not ceremonially clean. So these Egyptian magicians, these priests, are no longer, according to their own laws, clean enough to interact with their gods. So, and they can't produce the lice, which is why they tell Pharaoh, like, this is outside of the realm in which we are familiar. This is the finger of God. This is God. Like, we can't do this. And Pharaoh, of course, doubles down. But what's illustrative of this is that so we're seeing this like stacking, right? So water, life itself becomes corrupted, right? You lose vision of others and begin to think only of yourself. Then your problems multiply. Those are the frogs. And then a countless number of infinite problems, the lights, come into being. As you become more and more tyrannical, everything in your life starts to go wrong. And it affects other people. That is what God is demonstrating. The more tyrannical you become, the more chaotic your life is going to be. This is like natural order. This is like the natural law of things. So it applies today. It's the same thing that we see today. Paul tells us in Philippians that essentially, as you are overwhelmed, right? Which I can't, again, seeing the ground move with lice would be just, it makes me want to take a shower, even though. That overwhelm is the absence of peace itself. You no longer have any peace. There's no way you have any peace. I can't imagine anybody slept in Egypt for days after that, because what comes next? But Philippians basically is a juxtaposition to this, that when you focus on God and you're not focusing on yourself, you have true and lasting peace. That's Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. This kind of stuff was applicable then, it was applicable in Paul's day, and it's applicable now. And that anxiety, when I think of the lice, what the emotion that comes up in me is this would be like an overwhelm of anxiety. You would be just completely anxious, and it erodes your life. But it only gets better. The plague of flies. There's some debate if these were flies or if these were scarabs, which would have been beetle-esque, right? Have you guys seen The Mummy? The little scarab beetle? I guess it's not so little, but anyway, there's some debate if the translation means like fly, like housefly, we think of housefly, or if it's beetle, like scarab beetle. After doing some more research on this, I tend to the latter. I think it might be beetles because of the way that it directly challenges an Egyptian god. So we'll read about the plague first. Okay, so this is Exodus chapter 8, verse 20. And the Lord said unto Moses, Rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh. Lo, he cometh forth to the water, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. Else, if thou wilt not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies upon thee, and upon thy servants, and upon thy people, and into thy houses, and into the houses of the Egyptians. And the houses of the Egyptians shall be full of swarms of flies, and also the ground whereon they are. And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end that thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth. And I will put a division between my people and thy people. Tomorrow shall this sign be. And the Lord did so. And there came a grievous swarm of flies into the house of Pharaoh and into his servants' house of Egypt. The land was corrupted by reason of the swarm of flies. So, that these were scarab beetles. Because beetles are indicative of like decay, right? When you see a bug, like a cockroach or a beetle of some kind, you usually find them in a place of decay. That's usually where they're wallowing at, which is why they're not welcome in things like kitchens, right? You don't want beetles in your kitchen. Well, if we understand it as a beetle, which do fly and they do swarm and do all the things, then we can understand that this is a direct challenge to a god called Mercury, which is the god of the morning sun and rebirth. Okay, this god was represented as the body of a human, and the head was a scarab beetle. Right? There was no Egyptian god that I'm aware of the housefly. There is of the beetle, because of what the beetle represents. And so we see God demonstrating sovereignty not just over life and over this particular deity, but over transformation, over resurrection, over the ordering of the sea and the earth. We see he's making a division here, right? I'm going to divide my people from the Egyptians. My people are in the land of Goshen, which is where they were, which is, of course, under Egyptian control. But the land of Goshen is not affected in the same way that the rest of Egypt is affected. So we're seeing God is making a firmament, a divide here, which is a reflection of what he did in the beginning. So Genesis chapter 1.
My translation says distinction.
Distinction, yeah. Division, yeah. Yeah. Genesis chapter 1, 20 and through 25. Let's see. Well, he actually does. He makes the firmament in verses 6, 7, and 8. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And then we see on the fifth day, this is verse 20, God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth, in the open firmament of heaven." And then in verse 24, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beasts of the earth after his kind." And it was so. So we're seeing this division and the control, the sovereignty over the ability to make divisions and distinctions in a way that this Egyptian god is simply not capable of, and the use of beetles or flies is a direct representation of God's power over that Egyptian deity, right? And so these Egyptians are witnessing their gods being dismantled. That's very significant because that's pinned on Pharaoh. So I can imagine at this point, if you're an Egyptian, you're losing a little faith in your leader because so far your life has been terrible. Blood to drink, frogs, lice, now beetles, flies. And we're at the point now that we're well past the point of no return with the Egyptian magicians or priests because they can't keep up with this stuff. And so what does Pharaoh do? He hardens his heart again. He doubles down. He squeezes even tighter. Further embracing this chaos. Like with every decision Pharaoh makes to double down, he is essentially choosing to make it worse for himself and his people. But he can only think of himself because he is the archetypical tyrant. Like that's why Pharaoh is such a significant character, because if we don't pay attention, we can become little tyrants ourselves. And this is what happens in our lives. So basically, the way I look at that is those forms were so bad that you lose vision. You are disoriented and it clouds your ability to be present and to make proper distinguishment, right? So far you've had the undergirdings of your life erode because you're doubling down as a tyrant. Life is becoming more chaotic. And now at this point in your process, you're becoming blind to the ability to be able to make good decisions. I think that is what's going on with this plague of flies. Okay. So now we're going to get to the fifth plague, the plague of livestock death. Okay. Exodus chapter 9, first 6 verses. Then the Lord said unto Moses, "Go in unto Pharaoh, and tell him, Thus saith the Lord God of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if thou refuse to let them go, and will hold them still, behold, the hand of the Lord is upon thy cattle which is in the field, upon the horses, upon the asses, upon the camels, upon the oxen, upon the sheep, there shall be a very grievous murrain. And the Lord shall sever between the cattle of Egypt and the cattle of Israel, and there shall nothing die of all that is in the children of Israel. And the Lord appointed a set time, saying, tomorrow the Lord shall do this thing in the land. So what's interesting about these invitations is that there's actually clean his act up. Then tomorrow there's going to be punishment. And Pharaoh's got a whole day to think about this and doesn't act rightly. So, verse 6, and the Lord did that thing on the morrow, and all the cattle of Egypt died. But of the cattle of the children of Israel died not one. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, there was not one of the cattle of the Israelites dead. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. Remarkable. It is remarkable that at this point, he's still like, no, I refuse to see anyone else's God but me. So, this challenge is very interesting because this is a challenge to economy, right? So this is the Egyptian economy, more or less. Apis is the Egyptian deity of cattle, often depicted as a bull with kind of like it looks like a circle like between the horns. I should have put pictures up, but that look like a cow or look like a bull. Menevis is a manifestation of the sun god Ra or Re or Amun-Ra. Menevis would also be depicted as a bull. So you see this bull imagery, and God is over that. So, of course, in Genesis, which in my mind, if I think about an economy, the garden as economy-esque, everything needed was provided there. All their wants, their wealth was in the garden, which when you think that basically at the end of the day, when you think about an economy, you're thinking about a movement of wealth. Psalms tells us, the psalmist in chapter 50, that God reigns over the cattle, reigns over the beasts of the field. The phrase is, the cattle on 1,000 hills are mine. And I'll read that. Psalm 50, 10 and 11. For every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and wild beasts of the field are mine. Of course, God here is being allegorical with the, or metaphorical, I guess I should say, with the 1,000 hills. Does that mean that the cattle on hill number 1001 are not God's? No, of course not. He's using 1,000 to represent totality and completeness. Another reason there's 10 plagues, not 9, not 11, not 12, not 47. There's 10. Base 10. Completeness. That number 10 is significant, and that it's a wholeness. It's a whole number. And so Paul tells us in Timothy that the pursuit of wealth for its own sake is the root of evil. We see that Pharaoh not only is pursuing himself, but he's safeguarding, maybe not safeguarding is the right word, but his desire to have control over the Egyptian economy is why he loses control over the Egyptian economy. It seems paradoxical in a way, but when you don't have your eyes set on the highest ideal and can only see what's in front of you, you lose what's in front of you. That's natural law. This is natural order. And that tyranny destroys the object of the tyranny. It's a very humbling reminder about how we need to operate in the world. That's another reflection that Christ gives us in Matthew chapter 6, also Sermon on the Mount. Verse 28. Actually, I'll read 27 and 28. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? And why take ye thought for raiment? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. When we put our faith and our hope in economy, or our jobs, or whatever it is, telling us to have, which is to rely on him for those provisions, right? To lead to problems. When I let go, that things go right. And so that oppressive behavior comes with collateral damage, right? Like on the scale of society, if we have leaders that are only self-interested, right? We all know that the members of Congress do insider trading. We all know that they get wealthy because they get in there and they only think of themselves. Well, look where that has gotten us. What a mess we're in. It's natural law. When you have self-obsessed leaders, or you yourself are self-obsessed, there is collateral damage and your productive capacity naturally wanes as a result. It's very interesting. The pursuit of wealth will actually cause you to lose wealth if you pursue it in and of itself. We see that here, the plague of livestock death. And I think it's so cool that the plagues, when you really look at them, you can uncover all these neat little layers to them that are applicable to today. So we see God has asserted his dominion over life. He's asserted his dominion over economy. Well, if you lose order in your life and you lose order in your economy, what naturally follows? Sickness. And that's exactly what happens with the plague of boils. This is a very natural cascade into the devolution that tyranny will lead you down. And so the plague of boils, Exodus chapter 9, verse 8. And the Lord said unto Moses and unto Aaron, take to you handfuls of ashes of the furnace, and let Moses sprinkle it toward the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh, and it shall become small dust in all the land of Egypt. And it shall be a boil breaking forth with blains upon a man and upon beast throughout all the lands of Egypt. And they took ashes of the furnace and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses sprinkled it up toward heaven, and it became a boil breaking forth with blains upon man and upon beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boil was upon all the magicians and upon the Egyptians. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord would have spoken unto Moses. What's so interesting about this is that there's no like, hey, this happens immediately. When your life is eroded, you lost your wealth, you have lost your economy, and you're blind to others. You become sick, not tomorrow, you become sick. And this is what's happening. All of the people of Egypt get boils. Has anybody ever had a boil? Yeah. They don't seem pleasant. I've had things that are boil-esque, but I don't think anything quite like this. And so we see very clearly that God is pronouncing his sovereignty over health and over healing and over wellness, over your body, right? This is a direct challenge to Sekhmet, who is the goddess of healing, and Imhotep, the god of medicine. So Imhotep has kind of a neat story, and we won't get into it, but he was a man who became deified, basically, which is even more of a challenge that God is presenting to these deities, is that there is no God but God, and God is God of gods. And of course, this inversion over the blessing of life during creation. God saw that it was very good, right? That's Genesis chapter 1. This is an inversion of that. The opposite of health is, of course, disease, which is where tyranny will lead you. If you've ever known an addict, that's what happens, right? I had a family member who died years ago because the only thing that he consumed was alcohol. That's it. It got to that point, and he became diseased and sick. That pursuit just consumes. Of course, we know that chronic disease is absolutely debilitating. Do you remember way back when we talked about the woman with the blood condition? Or are you familiar with that story? We're going to read it. Mark chapter 5. Of course, Jesus is famous for his ability to heal, right? So Mark chapter 5. the scene is there's this huge crowd around Christ, and the description is they're thronging him. So to be thronged is essentially like your borderline crowd crush. Like it's intense. Verse 25 of Mark 5. And a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years. I'll pause there. We don't know exactly what her problem was, but we know that she had been bleeding in some capacity. There was a condition, there's a condition that's like a aberration of the menstrual cycle that basically causes you to bleed indefinitely. And I think that most people think that that's what is being described here. And had suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. And when she had heard of Jesus, came in the press behind and touched his garment. For she said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned about, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said unto him, thou seest the multitude, and sayest thou, who touched me? And he looked around about to see her that had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him, and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. So what's interesting about this account, is that unlike a lot of the miracles that Jesus performed that were healing, there was no call to action here. So like when he heals the blind and makes spittle and puts spittle in their eyes and so on, there's always a call to action. Go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Go and present yourself before the priest. In this case, there was no call to action. Christ says that her faith itself has healed her. Her belief in her action is what made the plague go away. But up until that point, she had spent everything she had trying to get man to resolve her problem. So we see that in pursuit of yourself, you're never going to get better. You will only get worse. We see this embodied in the plague of the boils, right? As Pharaoh continues to pursue himself and his own self-interests, not only is he getting sick, everybody around him is getting sick. That tyranny spreads. And as we've seen today, as society has been told that comfort should be our goal, desire should be our goal, self-happiness should be our goal, and it doesn't really matter what happens to the people around you, what do we have today? A sick society. Very sick. This is true then as it is true today. Back then it was boils, today it's any number of things. And I suppose we're at time. You want to keep rolling with the next plague, or you want to pause there? Bueller. Yes, no? We can do the plague of hail real quick. Okay. Okay. The plague of hail. This is Exodus chapter 9. It's a long account. We're not going to read the whole account. It's verse 13 through 35 is the entire saga of the plague of hail. But we're going to focus in on verses 22 through 26 of Exodus 9. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch forth thine hand toward heaven, that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, upon man and upon beast, and upon every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground. And the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail, and the fire mingled with hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree in the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. So, logically, God's starting to swing a little harder at Pharaoh because now he's demonstrating power over heaven itself. This is a direct challenge to 4 Egyptian gods, including 2 OG gods. Okay, so we have Nut, the goddess of the sky and of the cosmos. She's often depicted, like in the Egyptian drawings, as this almost elongated woman that stretches over other Egyptian gods that support her, right? Because it's a whole pantheon. Shu, the god of air, Seth, the god of storms and violence, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and rain. So Tefnut and Shu are actually brother and sister and husband and wife. And they gave rise to several other Egyptian gods. Tefnut actually is said to have given rise to, I forget the god. There's a lot of them, it's hard to keep track. I can't remember which god, but she sneezed. And that moisture gave birth to the god. So she is the goddess of moisture. And she and her husband / brother give rise to several gods, including Nut. Nut is the daughter of them. Anyway, more than you care to know about the Egyptian pantheon. But suffice it to say, these are representative of the gods of the heavens. And God himself is directly rebuffing them, right? And showing that, no, he is the God of heaven. That, of course, goes back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And so we see that these Egyptian gods are being further dismantled. This plague of hail is so extreme that basically Egypt is now a wasteland. The trees are destroyed, the herbs are destroyed. They already lost all their cattle. They're sick and covered in boils. Now there's fire and hail raging throughout the land. And they're all looking at Pharaoh like, bro, can we? So, this is the first time that we see Pharaoh admit some guilt, which is very interesting. So, this is verse 27 and 28. And Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron and said unto them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are wicked. Entreat the Lord, for it is enough that there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. What's very interesting about this is that as that account continues, we get to verse 34 and 35. And when Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail and thunders were ceased, he sinned yet more and hardened his heart, he and his servants. And the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, neither would he let the children of Israel, as the Lord had spoken by Moses. Now this is a psychopathic trait, right? So when we see Pharaoh as the archetype of the tyrant, not only is he a sociopath, but he has actual psychopathic traits. One of the hallmarks of a psychopath is that they have an inability to see past the immediate. They can't regulate how to barter with the future. Okay? Which is, we won't get into all of that, but Pharaoh's ability to be like, hey, I've sinned, take this away from me. And when that happens, he's like, great, I'm going to double down some more. It's just shocking. It's really shocking. So much so that at this point in your journey of devolution, if you are behaving like the tyrant, you're behaving like Pharaoh, you are now losing your ability to discern what is actually true because you cannot see past this. Like you are willingly covering your eyes, and that's what Pharaoh's doing. To see his land laid waste and then to go, never mind, I'm not going to let him go. Like, what else you got? I'm still God. I am still God. Like the rigidity of that is just, it's diametrically opposed to the natural order, right? And the reality itself will become hostile to you. That is the result of tyranny. You are then surrounded by the wasteland of your own creation. And for you to continue down that path is to continue down the path of consumption, which is exactly what locusts represent. So we can keep rolling if you guys want, but we can pause there because I know we're well over time. Pause. Okay.
There's still a chunk to
We have some left to discuss because, like I said, we're going to get into consumption, and that's what the plague of locusts is. Because when your reality has devolved to the point that it's a wasteland and you double down, then you're about to lose it all.
And then all this happened within like days or
Yeah.
like
So
day after day, basically.
yeah, more or less. So we don't have a like. I say we don't have. I have never tried to calculate the number of days. For example, the plague of blood lasted for 7 days. And then,
Yeah, one after the other.
mhm, yeah, and for the first several plagues, we actually saw that there was usually a buffer day. Hey, go tell Pharaoh that tomorrow I'm going to wreck his world. And then he has a whole day to think about it until we get to the plague of health or the plague of boils when it happens immediately in front of Pharaoh. And the rest of them are basically very similar. So I don't, it's a good question. I'll have to sit down with pen and paper and figure out if this happened over a period of like 4 weeks or so many days. I'm sure there's a significant number hidden in there somewhere. But yeah, it happened over one after
But it was
another.
like right after.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, in 6 months, it's the plague of locusts, yeah. Yeah, because the underlying idea is that this is a compounding effect, that tyranny compounds.
Before the hail broke, it says like some of the officials who feared the Lord brought in their servants and their cattle from the fields. And yeah, it would be hard to not, at that point, trust that what Moses says is coming is actually coming.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what's amazing is that Pharaoh's own authority, his very pursuit causes him to use that authority. He's pursuing. It'll always be true of tyranny. It is natural law. What's that?
It's relatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like all angles of it. How's life been?
Not too bad.